Hi, I'm Phoenix 11's Ken Lynch. We're here at the Pueblo Grande Museum and Cultural Park on Washington Street, just east of 44th Street, not far from the east end of Sky Harbor Airport. Now, you might think you know the Pueblo Grande Museum. After all, it's been here for a long time, but there have been a lot of changes made, and some of them might surprise you. Let's start by saying hi to Museum Director Roger Lidman. Hi, Roger. How you doing?
Hello, Ken. How are you?
Fine.
Good
Thanks
to
for
see
having
you.
us out today.
Our pleasure.
What do you want us to know before we get started looking around the museum?
Well, we'd like people to know that, of course, Pueblo Grande is operated by the City of Phoenix Parks, Recreation, and Library Department. We have been operated by that department since 1929, so we've actually been around quite a while. If you haven't had a chance to come out, though, in the last few years, there's a lot of new stuff that we're very proud of. Pueblo Grande Museum has the specific distinction of being a National Historic Landmark. Less than 2,000 get that distinction of being a National Historic Landmark because they have significant national importance. And Pueblo Grande is one of those sites.
Well, let's get started, shall we?
Okay.
Roger, this place is real popular with the public, too, isn't it?
That's right. In addition to the visitation by Phoenix residents, we also get a lot of attention from the tourism community. Pueblo Grande has been selected for 3 years in a row now as one of the top 50 tourism attractions in Arizona by the Business Journal, and we're very proud of that.
This is new, isn't it?
Yeah, that's our community room. We hold a lot of events and activities in that room, and it's also available for other groups to use, and it is available for rent for the public, too.
And, of course, here's the mound itself.
Right, that's the centerpiece of the park, and we'll be getting a chance to go visit that a little later today.
Great.
Okay, we're in the museum now, and I'd like to introduce you to John Andrews, our coordinator of
Hi,
public
John.
programs.
Hi Ken, how are you?
Nice to meet you today.
I'm glad you could come out.
Tell us a little bit about what your job is.
Well, I do a lot of different things. Mostly what I do are educational and public programs.
Okay.
And maybe we can head into our
Sure.
theater and hands-on room.
Let's start
and
in
talk
here,
a little
then.
bit about them.
All right, so we're heading for the, well, what's billed as the theater.
Right.
It's like a very cozy, comfortable room for people to watch an orientation video.
Right, this is where we have our orientation video. It's where we like for people to start out their tour of the museum. This is a reconstruction kind of picture of Holcomb children playing a game. And this will kind of give people an idea of how the Holcomb may have dressed, how the environment may have looked.
And over here on the other wall is a picture that incorporates a view of Camelback Mountain. That's really an excellent example of
Right.
how beautiful it must have been.
Right, and what we have is the Pueblo Grande Village in the background with Camelback Mountain behind it. And what we see is what the Salt River and the environment would have looked like, again, when the Holcomb was here.
And when the Salt was usually a year-round stream.
Right, right.
John, this is a much bigger room.
Right, this is our hands-on room where kids can come and learn about archaeology, what archaeologists do, the tools they use, maybe
How to
what some
pronounce
of
it?
the- Right, exactly, exactly.
And what's this here?
This is one of our hands-on stations, and what the kids can do is a rubbing on paper. Right here in the drawer are these nice little pot designs, and what the kids do is they put the pot over the design, and they grab one of these crayons, and they just rub on the paper, and the design comes out. And these are actual Holcomb designs from pottery.
Okay, so these aren't something the museum staff created. These are actual designs.
Right, these are ones we find on pottery.
Okay, gives the kids something to take home and something they made while they were here.
Right.
I really like this board right here, questions and answers, things that, it's kind of an interesting way to make a point and give a little lesson.
How about you try out the first question?
Okay, what can be considered an artifact? A soft drink can, an old coin, a projectile point, all of the above. I'm going to go for all of the above.
All the above? Let's see what
All
the
right,
answer
let's
is.
see if I'm right there. Hey, all of the above. How about that? An artifact is any object made or used by humans.
Right.
I never really thought about what that meant, but what's this over here?
Well, this is our children's area, which I guess I shouldn't really call it a children's area because I find a lot of adults playing here also. It's a place where they can reconstruct and make their own Holcomb village. We have platform mound, irrigation canals, a big houses, ball courts,
So these
trash
are-
mounds.
Oh, I see. These are just like little canal segments. You can
Right.
pick them up and
Right.
build your own platform mount.
Exactly.
Let's have a seat here, John. Oh, well, this is a great idea. This looks like it'd be a lot of fun.
It is.
And kids can spend a lot of time in here. Parents might want to wander the galleries and look at other things while the kids are playing in here. Now, you talked about educational programs, things for kids to do, say over the summer or on weekends. What kind of programs do you offer that parents might be interested in?
Well, one thing that's really nice is our Holcomb Experience summer workshops, and it's for children 6 to 14 years old. And they come to the museum for 4 days, Monday through Thursday, and they learn all about archaeology, about the museum, about the Holcomb, and other native peoples of the Southwest. They do crafts, all hands-on, and things that they make they get to take home.
And who teaches them?
Well, we have museum staff that teach them, some volunteers, and also some Native American instructors.
So one of the points we really ought to make then is that for families, Pueblo Grande Museum can be not only an interesting afternoon,
oh, definitely,
but also a place to come for some longer term activities on those long summer weeks when kids, of course, are always saying they have nothing to do. Are there costs involved with that?
There is a fee. It's a very small fee, I think. There's $30 for individuals for the 4-day session, and then we have a family rate, which is only $55.
That's for more than one child?
Right, up to 3 children.
Okay. Sounds like you keep pretty busy here, John.
Oh, definitely.
When we first walked in, we saw a couple of beautiful models in the lobby.
Would you like to go take a look at them?
Yeah, let's have a look at them.
Okay.
Okay, we're back here in the lobby of the museum, and John, we're standing at a couple of these beautiful models that have been created. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Well, this is a model of the Pueblo Grande village site, and the whole village covered an area about 1.5 miles in diameter. And the park today is about 1/5 that size, about 100 acres. What we have here at the Pueblo Grande village that was here when the Holcomb lived here, we have their irrigation canals back to the south of the platform mound.
So these two parallel lines here represent irrigation canals?
Right.
Is this the Salt River here?
It is, That's the Salt River. There were actually about 20 canals that covered this area. And there were also 3 ball courts at the village. There's a ball court here, north of the platform mound, another one, and then farther north, a 3rd one.
And this is the mound itself?
Right. This is the mound itself. This is what we're going to look at outside when we go out there.
So at the moment, we're like right about here?
Correct.
All right. And what are these other compounds we see around here?
These are all the residential areas that surround the village. And up top here, we have a big house that you can see. And that's, we think, very similar to the big house that's down at Casa Grande Ruins National Monument in Coolidge.
Now, these compounds are walled. Is there archaeological evidence to support that?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And the platform mound itself had a wall around it also. What that wall and the walls around the residential areas meant to the Holcomb, there's some debate.
Well, let's take a look over at our next model over here. Now, this model is the much larger scale of the platform mound itself.
That's right. This is a model of the Pueblo Grande platform mound, and it's based on the archaeological excavations.
When would have the mound looked like this?
Well, this mound model represents a year right around 1327. Now, what we're going to see outside is around 1450. So there will be a few different features outside than what we're going to see here.
Some of the things we're looking at, as you say, this is all supported by the archaeological evidence that derived from the mound itself. So we're looking at things like, for example, over here in this corner, there's a representation of a parrot, because there's evidence that exotic birds were imported from Central America?
Right. The Holcomb did trade for macaws and other parrots, and there was actually, it's been reported, a large parrot skeleton was found in this area of the platform mound when they excavated.
Okay, and we have rooms without doors and some of the other more mysterious things. That
right, lots of walls, lots of rooms that only had access from the ceiling. Some of those may have been storage rooms, maybe they were special rooms. We find a lot of different features, such as hearths and pottery and walls, courtyards, probably a lot of special areas where they did maybe ceremonial or religious activities.
But just looking at the way this is laid out, it's apparent, number one, not only was it very intricately planned, But also, whatever ideas lay behind the planning were pretty complex. This
Oh,
isn't
definitely.
an easy thing to understand.
Right, and it was something that took hundreds of hours of labor and probably hundreds of people over a long time to build.
Now, this was one of the more significant platform mounds of many that were around the Salt River Valley.
Right, and we can take a look at a map in here and actually see where the platform mounds are located.
That's a
in
good
all the
idea.
village
It'll give us a
sites.
better idea of what the village sites were like scattered around the valley and where we'd find other mounds. Let's do that.
Okay.
John, this is really big. This takes up a whole wall.
Right, this is our map that shows all of the Holcomb settlements and irrigation canals in the Salt River Valley.
Well, get us oriented. Where are we in relation to all these maps?
We're right
now?
here at Pueblo Grande Village, right here, located right at the headwaters of all these irrigation canals that fed most of the villages and fields on the north side of the river.
So that's East Phoenix, and tell us a little bit more. How vast is this exactly? Where's downtown, for example?
Downtown Phoenix is right here, and the irrigation canals along this one goes all the way over here into Glendale. Wow. About 20 miles
That's 20
long.
miles from here.
Right, right. And then going the other way, we have downtown Tempe, right down here, at ASU Stadium, and Mesa is out in this direction, where Chandler's down here, and then up here is the Salt River Indian community. So you can see they lived everywhere that we live today, just a huge area. Probably the biggest thing that the Holcomb are known for is the irrigation canals that they dug. And our irrigation system is really based on their irrigation system. And looking at the mileage of how many canals they dug, and keep in mind this is all with stone and wooden tools. It wasn't any backhoes or shovels or anything like that. We've counted over 1,000 miles of canals. So it was really amazing that these people could do that.
Now, is there more than one a mound site?
Right, like we were talking about before, there were lots of other platform mounds in the valley. There was the largest platform mound on the north side of the river here at Pueblo Grande, and then a number of other villages had platform mounds also, and these villages that had platform mounds were located about 3 miles apart.
Huh, so for example, there's Pueblo Grande, where we are now, and there's one at La Ciudad. Is that's a mound site also?
Right.
And that's about 3 miles from Pueblo Grande.
Correct. Correct.
And then as you go further to the west, in
Over
the
here.
Las Colinas site,
Right, there was more platform mounds.
more platform mound. Every 3 miles along the same canal system?
Right, right. And we think that these villages with the platform mounds really controlled the irrigation. They're little irrigation communities is what they were. Some of the canals that we have today, parts of them are actually Holcomb canals that they redug.
Is that right?
That's right, and we're actually going to see one outside when we go out to visit the platform mount.
Okay. Well, this map that we're looking at is on the wall of the very opening, at the very beginning of the exhibition space here at Pueblo Grande Museum. Let's take a look and see what else is back this way. Earth and Fire, the pottery traditions of southern Arizona. John, we're now in one of the, or in the changing exhibit gallery here at Pueblo Grande, right?
That's right. This is our changing exhibit hall. We have 1 to 3 exhibits per year in here.
So if somebody comes in February, for example, and returns in the fall, perhaps they'll see something different in here.
Right, right.
Well, let's take a look at some of the pottery here. This is prehistoric and historic material here.
Right, Ken. This is a little exhibit case that shows the prehistoric pottery and how similar it is to the historic pottery in design and manufacture and shape. What we see is the same types of pottery, the same pottery manufacturing techniques, same designs in the Holcomb and the people today.
But in this case, for example, this is very modern stuff. This pottery was made recently, in recent times.
Right. This is a lot of pottery, in this case, is made by Phyllis Cerna, and she's a Maricopa Indian lady who makes her traditional pottery today.
You know, looking at those effigies, the frog and the bird there, is there any way of knowing if maybe that's what the Holcomb stuff looked like when it was new?
It's possible. It's really hard to say. The stuff that we find in the ground is very old. They did make pottery that had effigy symbols like birds and snakes and all sorts of different designs on them.
John, here we see some pottery that it looks old, but it doesn't look prehistoric.
Right, this is pottery from around the turn of the century, and a lot of it was made for the tourist trade.
For the tourist trade.
Right, and it was kind of a revival for some of these potters to get them back into making their traditional pottery.
Why is this on display here at Pueblo Grande?
Well, one of the things that we want to always do here at the museum is show how the people are still around. The native people are still here. They're still making pottery. They're still an active part of the Arizona culture.
So something like we're looking at right now is definitely a part of the history of pottery making by these people in this area.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, Glenna Kane knows a lot more about that, and she's working on an exhibit right on the other side of this wall.
Right, let's go.
Why don't we go say hello?
There. Well, Ken, let me introduce you to Glenna Kane, our curator of exhibits.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for seeing us today.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about what a curator of exhibits does? What's your job here?
Well, I'm responsible for all the exhibits here at Pueblo Grande, the interior exhibits that you see here and the outdoor exhibits as well. I work on the design and implementation of them.
How do you come up with the ideas? So you have to formulate a concepts and themes for the exhibits. So what
Right.
are some of your goals in doing that?
Well, our mission here at the museum is to interpret the archaeological site that's outside and the Hohokam people who once lived here. We try to do that inside by reconstructing their cultural lifeways to give people an idea of what life was like many years ago. Here's an exhibit on food preparation, and we have the actual prehistoric artifacts on display, and we supplement that with photographs of food preparation. The ceramics that you see and the groundstone artifacts that you see are prehistoric. Things like this that don't survive in the archaeological record because of the materials they're made out of are reconstructed to give people, again, an idea of how they might have been used, a sifter that food was sifted through into a pot here.
And why is this display opened up today?
Well, we're checking the condition of the artifacts. Sometimes things have to be rotated out depending on the condition they're in. Some of these things are quite delicate. And Holly Young, our curator of collections here, can probably tell you a little bit more about that.
Hi, Holly.
Hello, Ken.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Curator of collections, what does that mean?
That means that I'm responsible for taking care of all the artifacts that are collected by the museum. Not just the artifacts, but also the documentation, the photographs, that kind of thing.
So clearly not everything that's collected or available is on display here
Oh,
at
absolutely
Pueblo Grande.
not.
Yeah. Well, what brings you out to this particular display today?
Well, we're checking on the pots. We do have a problem with prehistoric pottery having salt content in the vessel. And when the humidity fluctuates, then the salts will move through the body of the pot, crystallize on the outside, and actually pop off portions of the surface. I can soak it in several changes of distilled water and actually leach out the salt so that we don't have that problem in the future.
I understand that back in the lab you've got a pot that you're working on to correct that problem precisely.
Absolutely. That pot used to be out here in this case. We had to take it out because it was having problems with salt efflorescence, and I've had it soaking and it's ready to come out of its final bath.
Well, let's go see how it's doing.
All right.
Well, while Holly's getting ready for us in the back and removing that damaged pot from the solution it's in, let's step out to the east side of the museum. Say hi again to John Andrews.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks. Now, this is obviously a major wall, right? What are we looking at here?
What we're seeing here is the west retaining wall of the platform mound.
Now, this is a prehistoric wall?
Yes,
Okay.
this gives you an idea of what the wall looked like in prehistoric times. And this is the biggest mound in the valley, the biggest platform mound that the Hohokam built.
Can you give us an idea of how big it is?
Well,
Or was when it was at its peak?
yes. The length and width is about 300 feet by 160 feet.
It's about the size of a football field.
Right, right. Very, very large.
That's really big.
And it was about 20 feet tall with structures on top.
Okay.
So it's quite a massive structure for its day.
Well, we've got a lot to see then. Why don't we take a look?
Let's go. Now, the Hohokam lived at Pueblo Grande from around 450 AD. And in the beginning, they built pit houses and later ball courts. It wasn't until around 1100 or so that they started building these large platform mounds.
Now here, this is a real sharp corner here. That's really well preserved.
Right. This is one corner of the mound. You really get a good idea of its construction and how they built it with the caliche rock that they got on site, some of the sandstone and granite that they had to walk miles to get.
Oh, this looks like it's fresh mud, though.
Yeah, this is part of our stabilization project to preserve the mound and help preserve it for future generations. And I think you're going to be meeting up with Todd Bostwick, city archaeologist, later on, and I think he'll be talking more about that.
John, right over here is one of the, I guess it's an SRP canal, isn't it?
Yes, this is the Grand Canal, right here to the south of the platform mound, and it's actually a Holcomb canal. The SRP redug when they were building the canals back in the 1800s.
So evidence again of how acutely the Hohokam were aware of gradient and the topography and were able to design an excellent canal.
Exactly.
John, as we approach the mound, there is what just looks to be a clump of rocks here, but you've been able to identify this.
Yes, this is part of the compound wall that surrounded the mound. It went entirely around the mound. It was about 3 feet to 4 feet thick and about 6 to 7 feet tall.
That's a pretty big wall.
Yeah, very, very large.
Is there any way to determine its outline?
There's about 3 places where it still exists. We can see 2 of them right here. It runs along the south side of the wall, or of the platform mound right here. And what it did is it went out toward this historic wall right here, and then it cuts north. You can see that small little ridge right there where it still exists. It ran all the way along the east side of the platform mound.
Any theories as to why the Hohokam would have built a tall wall around the mound?
Well, there's a couple different theories of why they built the compound wall. One, obviously, is for defense, for warfare. And another theory is that it's more of a social barrier. The mound is a really special place, and only certain people would have access to the activities going on there.
Well, John, here we are coming up on the very top of the platform mound. As you're touring people around here, what kind of questions do you hear?
Well, people often want to know if this is a burial mound. And it was not a burial mound. It was a mound built for structures and rooms on top where people may have, some people may have lived or performed certain ceremonies.
John, the first place we've come up to is called Miller's Rooms. What are these?
This is where the first excavations into the mound took place back in 1901 by Dr. Joshua Miller, who was not an archaeologist, but he was president of the Arizona Antiquarian Society. And what you can see is still part of one of the tunnels that he dug into the mound.
This small feature down here, yeah. That's,
right.
Okay. And he dug these as an exploration, as a test?
Right. He was looking for a burial. He thought that the whole mound was a large burial mound, possibly for a Holcomb king.
John, now we're on a shot of one of the walls here. It looks like there's 2 very thick walls here.
Yes, here on the east side is the outside retaining wall of the platform mound, and then inside there's another retaining wall that was built previously. What they did is they expanded the mound, and this shows the dynamic nature of the mound, how it grew over time.
Okay. What went in between those 2 walls? Any way of knowing?
Well, there was a series of walls and rooms, and what we figured out is this is how they built the mound. They built rock-walled cells, and then they filled in these cells with dirt and trash. And then they capped over the cells and then built their structures on top.
John, this feature is called Room 11, and there's something kind of arresting about this, isn't there?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite room on top of the mound, and what it shows is the Hohokam's knowledge of astronomy.
How so?
Well, at sunrise on the summer solstice, the sun rises over to the east by Papago Buttes, and the sun shines through this corner doorway and passes through the side doorway. And that marks the longest day of the year.
And the argument against that being coincidence, I guess, is that it would be unusual to put a doorway in a corner.
Right. This is the only room that we know of where there's a corner doorway in a Hohokam room.
So a little shaft of light goes right along this axis here.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. Now, John, here we are in another room closer to the center of the mound, and this looks like it's a sealed-off doorway.
Yes, this is another special room on top of the mound, and what they did is they sealed up this doorway. This is how archaeologists found the room. And what they did is they filled in the room on the other side with dirt and trash and built another small mound on top where they had another structure where they're even higher.
Wow. Now these walls also seem particularly thick. Am I wrong about that? Are these thicker than normal?
No, but they were taller.
Uh-huh.
They were taller walls than normal rooms. They had 8-foot-high ceilings.
Wow. Any speculation as to why they would have built rooms with ceilings that high?
Well, most of the rooms are only about 6 foot high, because the Hohokam weren't a very tall people, about 5'6" for men, 5'1" for women. So what we think is they were using this room to perform certain ceremonies where they would need large, elaborate headdresses, and they could be in full costume while doing those ceremonies.
Wow. John, as we come up on one of the more spectacular views from the mound overlooking the canal, we come across this really huge room. But was this ever really used as a room?
Not exactly, Ken. It was a series of small rooms that was like a maze of walls and rooms in this area, and it was all filled in. But what we found underneath was a series of post holes that looked like something from like a storage bin.
Mm-hmm. Something in the floors here, you mean?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
This really gives you an idea of how actually high you're standing and looking down on the ground surface down below.
So John, though, this wall here at one time was at the very edge of the mound.
Right, this was the outside retaining wall at one time, and then what the Hohokam did, like we saw earlier on the other side, was they built a large wall and expanded the mound out about 30-40 feet.
Okay, John, as we walk here along the center of the mound, we're really approaching a demarcation area, kind of, though an unofficial one.
Right. This is a boundary that marks the excavated portion of the mound from the unexcavated portion.
Excavated would be everything we see here to the south side of the mound.
Right. The south half of the mound has been excavated for the past 100 years. There's been some type of investigation. And the northern half of the mound is very similar to what it looked like back in the 1800s when the first Europeans came here.
So this has remained undisturbed then?
Right.
Why is that?
Well, the mound is preserved. We're waiting for maybe future techniques that archaeologists might come up with that are less destructive. And we are stewards of the site.
You know, and now as we approach the northern side of the mound, we see some really interesting features out here. Looks like a maze almost, the way it's laid out.
And that's exactly what we call it. What it is, it's a series of rooms and courtyards and walls that were next to the platform mound and inside the compound wall. They ran right along in the northwest corner of the platform mound compound. And what we think was going on in these areas was a lot of craft production, and there were a lot of hearths where they may have been preparing foods. So it was also a very special place that had to do with the platform mound.
You know, I notice over here on the very far north end, it looks like a really small, I don't know if we can swing over there and have a look at that, Matt, I guess we can. It looks like a very short door.
That is an actual Hohokam doorway, though when the Hohokam were here, it was not that small. What we've done is brought in a lot of sterile soil as fill to preserve the ancient foundations that the Hohokam built from the walls.
Okay,
that
so
remained.
we're not looking at the floor, in other words, there.
No, the actual Hohokam floor was a few feet lower than that.
I see.
And these large walls here were actually 2-story buildings.
Really?
Really. They, the Hohokam had a number of structures that were multiple story.
Huh. So there must be a lot of conjecture about what went on down here. You mentioned there was evidence of crafts making found here. What else might have happened here?
A lot of hearths and ovens where we think they may have been preparing food, maybe for some kind of ceremonial feasts that were going on top of the mound or in other places of the village.
You know, as we look out here, now this is a feature that might not have been here. If you haven't been to Pueblo Grande for a while, you might not have even known it was there. That's a ball court, right?
Right. That's one of the ball courts on the site, and we recently completed a trail that goes out to the ball court, so people can go out to see the ball court now, where before they could only see it from on top of the mound.
John, as we approach the ball court now, we're entering an area of the park where there are going to be a lot of changes.
Right, this is one of the places that we're expanding on. We're trying to reconstruct the environment that the Hohokam lived in. Taking the canal and adding a small pond where we'll have plants and fish.
That'll go right here?
Right.
How about over here?
Up above here, we're going to be reconstructing Hohokam houses.
Wow.
Large, full-scale pit houses and later classic period houses.
That'll be great. Well, John, as we approach the ball court now, this looks really smooth, these walls. Is this recreated?
Well, it is reconstructed as part of our stabilization program, but it is very, very similar to what the ball court would have looked like when the Hohokam were here.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can kind of slide down in there without killing ourselves here. Now, ordinarily, of course, people aren't encouraged to do this, but...
No, we like to keep people on the trail to help preserve things, but I think this will give us a good perspective of how large the court is.
It's a pretty good size.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the smaller courts that the Hohokam built. And this is one court out of 3 that was built here at Pueblo Grande.
Okay. Now, right behind us here in this area, I don't think we can see it real clearly, but there's a large stone that appears to be exactly in the middle of this court.
Right. This was a large river cobble that was here when the archaeologists excavated the ball court in the 50s. And what we think is it divides the court in half. There were also stones at each end in front of the goals, and we think that those were zones of play.
Okay. Why don't we walk over towards this goal? Now, we call it a goal, but that's really a surmise, right?
Right. We don't really know what the game was like that the Hohokam played, and so we think that it was probably a game where they had to get a ball into these goals at the end. We really don't know what the ball game represented to the Hohokam because obviously they were not here when Europeans came and wrote down the history of Arizona. The berm around the outside was kind of like the grandstands where people could stand or sit and watch the game and cheer on their team.
John, I've never seen anything like this in the valley.
Yeah, this is actually the only excavated Hohokam ball court that you can go and see and see exactly what it looked like when the Hohokam were here.
Now, at the time that this was in use, standing on the playing surface, could you see the 20-foot tall mound in the distance, or were there different chronologies involved?
There was. The Hohokam ball court started around 750, and they went for about 500 years up until around 1200. In fact, when we were walking down the trail to the ball court, we were actually walking back in time, in a sense, because the ball court was an earlier feature of the village than the platform mound, which was much later.
Well, obviously, you've done a great job of preserving this area. Now, there's a lot of preservation going on here at the museum, right?
In fact, let's go over and talk to Todd Boswick, the city archaeologist, and he can talk about all the stabilization that we've been working on.
Okay. And here's Todd now. Hi, Todd.
Good morning, Ken.
How you doing?
Fine. How
Good.
are you doing?
Let's talk a little about what you're doing here. This is a prehistoric wall, right?
Yes, this wall is the north wall of the platform mound at Pueblo Grande, and the wall serves to hold up the dirt and the mud that's behind it that creates the platform on top.
So over the centuries then, what kind of problems arise? How does this wall deteriorate?
Well, because it's just made of mud and local caliche stone that they quarried nearby, the rains tend to run over the side and create gullies and erode parts of the wall.
And when you spot damage and deterioration, what can you do?
Well, we have to measure the amount of erosion that occurs, and then we essentially replace the mud and the stone that was removed from the rain. So it's a constant process of repatching, I guess, if you will, the walls.
So down here, for example, these aren't necessarily prehistoric artifacts here. These are modern replacements?
Yes, these are modern replacements. You can see we're starting to add a layer here that is eroded completely out, but we use only natural materials, and we match the materials that we gather also from the nearby area to the materials that are in the mound itself.
Now, Todd, directly behind you is what looks like dirt that's overspilled the wall, but that's not the case at all, is it?
No, this is actually a stabilization technique that we use when we want to stabilize a wall permanently, and that is it buttresses the wall with this backfill that we bring in, and we do chemical tests on the soil itself to make sure that it matches the material in the wall, so that they're compatible, but this will prevent the wall from ever falling down. The challenge, though, with this kind of stabilization technique is that it removes the walls from the view of the public, and we want the public to be able to experience the unique architecture here, and so we've only done this for part of the mound. We identified those areas that we felt were most critical and brought in this back dirt, but in other areas next to the trail, as the area that we talked about here, we just completely continually renew the wall as it erodes.
Okay, and do everything you can to keep it available to the public so people can see it.
Exactly.
You know, one thing I wanted to ask you about before we move on today, and that is petroglyphs. We hear so much and have seen so many pictures of those beautiful glyphs chipped into rocks. I didn't see any here at the museum. Are there any petroglyphs at the mound site?
There were no petroglyphs that were created here on site. We do have a few small stones that were brought in for display purposes. The Hohokam created their rock art petroglyphs, as they're called, and sometimes pictographs, which means painted rock art. Most of it's pecked petroglyphs, are located in the mountains that surround the site, though. In fact, nearly every mountain range surrounding the Salt River Valley has Hohokam petroglyphs.
Now, those are, of course, subject to interpretation?
They are, and for many years, archaeologists and other scientists just sort of ignored them because they felt that they couldn't be interpreted. But new models, ethnographic data, and a variety of information is now used to present hypotheses about the possible meanings of them. And indeed, there's some very interesting and elaborate models that have been presented as to explain what the rock art might have meant to the prehistoric Hohokam.
In a nutshell, can you tell us what some of those ideas are?
One of them is sign markers. They're located along trails, major trails, and they appear to indicate direction or resources that might be available along the trail, or even identifying territory that a person would be entering into as they were traveling on the trail. Other rock art looks like it may have a spiritual nature where it's expressing religious experiences, maybe even visions or dreams that religious specialists have had. So we have a number of different hypotheses that we're considering.
A lot of possibilities, and as long as they're out there, they sure will be interesting to look at and observe and wonder about, won't they?
Yes.
Well, Todd, that sure was interesting. Sure appreciate your time today.
My pleasure.
What we're going to do next is hook up with Holly again and have a look at the collections area.
Have fun.
Thanks. Well, Holly, here we are in the collections hallway, I guess. Looks kind of stark.
Yes, part of that was the architect's artistic statement, wanting it to be stripped down and industrial, but we also wanted to go for that. We wanted to avoid what's sometimes called sick building syndrome, where things like the glues in carpeting or the formaldehyde in new wood products actually sends off chemicals into the air and not only makes people sick, but it actually attacks artifacts, photographs, paper.
The kind of things you're trying to preserve.
That's right. So having this nice open hallway where things can't hide, we don't really have baseboards where bugs can hide too much. You can see our insect traps here. We do integrated pest management at Pueblo Grande.
Right, that's a glue trap, isn't it?
That's right. All we do is try and catch and see what we've actually got in the building. We deal with pests with non-chemical means.
Okay.
It's been very successful.
And the lab is this way?
Yes, this way. And the pot that we're going to look at is right back here. It's done soaking now. This is its third go-round. And what I'm going to do is let this sit over on a towel while I test the spill water. But you can see along here how it's kind of crumbled a bit. You can see some of the voids in the pot's paste. Very similar to what's going on with this vessel, which was also treated for salt efflorescence problem. You can see sometimes it gets pretty bad and actually pops off whole sections of the side.
Holly, what other kind of work do you do here in the lab?
In the lab is where we do most of the cataloging of the artifacts. We do a little bit of cleaning, sometimes some simple repairs. But for the most part, we work on documenting objects, making sure we know what we have, what condition it's in, and what it might have been used for prehistorically.
Okay, so from here, many of the things wind up heading for the vault, is that right?
That's right.
Why don't we go take a look at that? Sounds interesting.
Terrific. I'd love to show you.
Now we're heading towards the big door. This is the collections room, the vault as it's
The
known?
vault, yes, we call it the vault. This portion of the museum has its own security system. Also, there's only two of us that have keys to this room, Roger Lidman, our director, and myself. Let me go ahead and disarm this. And I'll get it unlocked.
Double keys, or double locks, I see.
That's
Same key
correct.
for both locks.
That's correct. A nice big heavy door, too. Let's go inside.
Okay. Well, here we are.
Yes,
This
you
is
can
big.
tell. It is.
And loud.
You can tell that it's a little bit more humid in here, a little bit colder.
Yeah.
That's because of our environmental control units here. They're also what makes that horrible noise. What we try to do is keep the temperature within a degree or two of 65, which is its set point, and we try to keep the relative humidity between, say, 40 and 35%.
Okay.
So a little bit moister than it is outside, but not really too humid, not to the point where we're going to start running into any problems. If it gets too dry, the photographs suffer from that. If it gets too moist, of course, things like our rare books or our maps suffer from the changes in relative humidity. So we try and keep it pretty constant.
I would think warm and moist would be like fungus and molds and that sort of
That's
thing
right.
too would be a
Insects
problem.
like it a lot more
Insects,
too.
sure.
That's
Okay.
one of the reasons why it's so cold, is
Okay.
because their activity is depressed when it's, say, below 70 degrees.
All right. Well, looking around, we've got rack after rack of boxes, and just right down this aisle, for example, it says Phoenix Chinatown on all these boxes. This must be from the America West excavation site, then.
That's absolutely right. We do have historic collections from sites within the city of Phoenix, and the Phoenix Chinatown project is one of the more interesting ones.
Oh, we get to look inside. All right.
Absolutely. We have things here that relate to the people who lived in the Phoenix Chinatown area.
Oh my, look at that.
For example, this comb that would have been used by a woman, or this glass marble, a nice blue one.
That's something.
We've also got ceramic marbles,
Put
which
these
used to be
down.
much more common.
Ceramic marbles.
Ceramic marbles, that's right.
And how long ago was Chinatown inhabited? Do you know offhand?
This particular portion was inhabited just before the turn of the century to about 1920, 1925. Of course, there was continuous habitation, but after that time, the Chinese community became more integrated with the rest of the Phoenix.
If I remember right, wasn't it a bit of a surprise to a lot of people that there was even a Chinese community there?
That's
People
right.
had kind of forgotten about it, I guess.
That's right. Once again, there's been that lapse of time between when the Chinese people were centered on that portion of town and when they dispersed into the rest of the community.
And we just kind of forget that, I guess. Wow, a lot of interesting stuff here. And here's a cabinet full of what looks like more pottery. It looks a lot like the pottery that we saw in the exhibit spaces.
That's exactly right. This is Maricopa pottery. This is a special cabinet that was purchased by the Pueblo Grande Museum Auxiliary specifically for the storage of our Maricopa pottery collection. Many of these pieces are at least 100 years old, some a little bit older, and Maricopa pottery has its own special problems. You can see how faded the paint is on some of these pieces. The paint is actually mesquite sap that's barely baked on. So if you think about what's on the inside of an oven, that's pretty much what we've got here. It's just a baked on organic material.
Wow, it almost looks like a watercolor, doesn't it?
That's right. It can be very easily damaged or wiped off, and if it gets too humid or if it gets some of the shiny surfaces, you can see this one, for example.
Yeah.
A good
You can't
example
barely
of
detect anything on
all kinds of abuse to this particular piece. Not only has it been broken, but it's also been abraded and the paint is virtually non-existent anymore. That was probably cleaned at one point in time.
Well, when you see something like this on the second shelf from the top here, it looks like a, I don't know.
It's an elephant.
Is that an elephant?
That's an elephant.
And that's obviously historic then, right? There weren't
Yes,
any
it
elephants
is.
here back in the Hohokam days, I don't
No,
think.
no, not at all. But that piece dates from about 1890, possibly a little bit earlier, and either a circus came through or a circus poster did. The Maricopa potters were wonderfully inventive. I mean, you can see this big range of shapes and styles of pottery. They were just wonderfully creative, and they came up with, you know, any kind of design you might be able to think of, including elephants or pots with faces on them, like this effigy figure right here.
Very interesting. Well, let's keep going, Holly. You've got, looks like every time we open a drawer or pull out a box, we find something to talk about.
The room is full of stories.
Well, Holly, here's C2. Let's see what's in here.
This cabinet is where we have a lot of materials from Pueblo Grande site. The ceramics in this drawer were actually excavated during the course of the Hohokam Expressway project. You can see here, one of my favorites is this baby bird vessel, the little wings and tail and the big open beak mouth.
Oh,
That's
is that
quite
what that
unusual.
is? Would you mind moving that just a little so we can see
Sure.
get a little better angle on that? It's really, we can see the open mouth real clearly from here. Let's see what else we got. On go the gloves. Oh, little stubby little wings, I see, and a little tail back there.
And it was
that's
some
very
kind
charming.
of pouring vessel. It does have the handle that was used.
Right, to pour something there. So these are obviously very old indeed.
Yes,
And
this particular piece is at least 1,000 years old.
1,000 years old.
This is a collection of stone axes,
Oh, they're beautiful.
once again excavated from the Pueblo Grande site during the Hohokam Expressway project. You can see that the axes varied greatly in size, from this small one to one that's just so big, I don't like to pick it up with one hand. Let's
That's
put
a
it that
canal
way.
digger there, I would think.
It's
Yeah.
really something. So much work went into these axes, you have to think that they were very important tools.
Are these blades of some kind back here?
Yes, these are agave knives. We have to be careful so
Okay,
the
I've
drawer
got this.
doesn't fall out. But you can see the notched edges here. They're very flat. I can take one out of the bag if you like.
Sure, yeah, let's have a look.
And these have been examined microscopically, and people have found that they are used on plant products.
This is to like get the heart out of the agave plant?
That's right, to cut off the leaves. Okay,
Sure.
you can see this side is notched as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can see there's some polish along the edge.
It's been used, definitely. Okay, let's see what's in this one. Wow, aren't these beautiful?
They are something. This is a cache of quadrupeds, probably dogs, possibly deer, that were found here at Pueblo Grande once again during the Hohokam Expressway excavations. They were found together in a pit house, and they date to the Saccatone phase, which is about, say, 900 to 1100 AD.
How mysterious. They were all found together?
All found together. You can see that some of them look like they're pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my.
There's a couple that have swollen stomachs.
Yeah.
And they're all the same kind of clay. They were all decorated, but with different designs. This one has vertical stripes. Two of them have horizontal stripes on
You
their
just
legs.
barely see them, yeah.
That's right. Didn't
And
survive very well.
who knows why, right?
That's right. That's right. But this is, this is probably a good example as any of a cache of objects that had some kind of significance to the people that we just can't interpret. Did it have to do with fertility? It's possible. It's
Yeah,
entirely
pregnant
possible.
animal, I suppose. On what was obviously a ceremonial site. This is from the mound, did you say?
No, this is from a pit house.
Oh, from a
actually.
pit house. Huh. Some kind of private ceremony then. Who knows?
Who knows? Could be, right, could be household magic. We have shell artifacts. The Hohokam were noted for their artistry in shell. This particular example is very interesting. It's been etched.
So it has.
What they would do would be to paint a design, the reverse actually of the design they wanted, with some kind of resist, say a pitch or a tar, a natural tar of some kind. And then they would treat the shell with something acidic. Fruit juice would work, or a vinegar, fruit juice that had been allowed to sit around and ferment for a while. And then they would remove the resist, and the result is this design, this very delicate design.
Well, Holly, we've just scratched the surface of this room. We could do a whole program on this, but unfortunately we don't have time. It sure is interesting, though.
Well, I'm glad you came, and I'm happy that we had a chance to explore some of this stuff.
Well, it's been a very interesting day here at the Pueblo Grande Museum. As you've noticed, I'm sure, there are a lot of things new here, a lot of changing exhibits, a lot of things for the kids to do, too. So if you haven't been to Pueblo Grande in a while, take the time to stop out and really explore this place. The Pueblo Grande Museum and Cultural Park is on East Washington, just east of 44th Street. For City Scene, I'm Ken Lynch.